Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, and feel free to raise your hand or just unmute if you have a question as we go through this. Bismillah, should we get started?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين والعاقبة للمتقين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Salam.
وعليكم السلام.
Alhamdulillah. It's a pleasure for me to be with you here all today. Today, inshallah, we're going to be discussing Umrah and the steps of Umrah and how to perform Umrah. It's a tremendous blessing to be able to do so. And alhamdulillah, this year I actually created my own slides. So I went through multiple guides and a couple of books and tried to consolidate the information. So it's not too much information, but just enough, inshallah, so it's beneficial. So inshallah, I'll have some slides here. And we'll go through the whole step for Umrah. So what is the meaning of Umrah? Umrah is the minor pilgrimage. And so the major pilgrimage that we perform as Muslims is the Hajj. And what distinguishes Umrah from Hajj is one, that Umrah has fewer rituals. With Hajj, there are a couple of more rituals that people perform. And inshallah, when we're going around Makkah, we'll see some of those sites, Mina, Arafat, and so on. However, for Umrah, Umrah is much fewer rituals. The other thing is that it's not during a specific season. And so if you notice with Hajj, it happens during the month of Dhul Hijjah, during the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, whereas Umrah can happen any other time of the year. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he performed Umrah many times in his life. Hajj, he only performed once. But with Umrah, he recommended, and there's a lot of reward, especially for doing it during Ramadan. Another benefit to Umrah is that there's a lot of spiritual benefit to performing Umrah. One of them is that it cleanses one of sins. Especially if a person performs Umrah, from one Umrah to the next, the sins are purified in between. Another benefit of it is that it prevents someone from falling into poverty. And so it's a cure against poverty. I know that people spend their money towards Umrah, but the idea is that inshallah, it actually puts barakah in your wealth and your rizq, and you get money out of it. Allah blesses your sustenance. And so there's a lot of spiritual benefit to performing Umrah. So when we discuss Umrah, there's going to be a lot of steps. It gets very technical. There's going to be a lot of questions of what's okay, what's not okay, what order to do things, and so on and so forth. But what I wanted to start off with today is specifically this idea of orientation. How should we orient ourselves spiritually? We're just about to, go on this incredible journey. For many of us, it's the first time that we're performing this journey. We're performing Umrah. And it's, inshallah, the expectation and the hope and the prayer is that this is going to be a life-changing experience for us, whether we've performed it before or many, many times, or if we've never performed it before, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unlocks certain doors for us. He opens aspects of our life for us. He improves our life in better ways, and he improves our relationship with him. So I think the attitude that we should have, right, just to orient ourselves spiritually before we start getting into the technical details, is that we should think to ourselves that, I am speaking to myself as well. I've spent my entire life making an absolute mess of my life, committing sins knowingly, unknowingly. My life is a mess, right? And before Allah, that's my perspective. I'm the most needy person on the planet, and I'm the least deserving person to go for Umrah. And I'm thanking Allah, oh Allah, thank you so much for inviting me. And please, please, please forgive me. Everything else that we're going to discuss is just details, right? It's just details and we want to have proper ritual, but that's the perspective that we should have, that we're really in need and Allah has blessed us by inviting us, even though we don't deserve it. And because of that, that's what guides us and pushes us and moves us and makes it a spiritual journey for us, right? We could have the most technical Umrah you can imagine, every single little detail and rule, but this is the most important thing, right? If we don't have that, then none of it will really matter. And at the end of the day, what we want is an accepted Umrah, right? We don't just want to perform some rituals, go some places, and that's about it. We want it to be accepted from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we have to recognize that this is a very physical journey. It's physically taxing and we have to prepare ourselves, but it's also a spiritual journey as well. And one more thing that I'd like to share before we jump into the details is, alhamdulillah, now Umrah, Hajj, there's a lot of comforts that didn't exist in the past, right? In the past, people would take time away from their family, from their work. They would travel for weeks, maybe months. It would be a very physically taxing journey. Now, alhamdulillah, we are able to get on a plane. We're staying in nice accommodations. Everything's air conditioned. The food is provided, right? There's a lot of benefits. And so when we do inevitably face, and there will be some difficulties, some discomforts, we should recognize that we have it much better than people in the past had it. And we should be grateful for that. The other thing that I'd encourage all of us is imagine that you are a terminally ill patient. You're a cancer patient, right? And the only way for you to get treated is to go to a specific hospital, maybe in New York or in Europe or some other part of the world. And when you're going on this journey, when you're going there to the city, you're not thinking about the tourist attractions. You're not thinking about how nice the view from the hotel or the hospital room is. You're not thinking about how good the food is. Your real, focus and your goal is how can I get better? And so that's what I think our perspective should have, that we are sick. We're spiritually sick. We're completely in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we set off on this journey, we have that perspective in mind. Everything else that's beneficial, we're grateful for. But this is walillah. This is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for Him alone that we're performing all of this, and everything else is just extra to that, inshallah. So I hope that helps kind of orient us and prepare us for this journey, inshallah, and put our headspace in the right place, inshallah. I apologize if I spent a bit of time on that, but I thought it was very important, inshallah. So let's get started, inshallah, with the actual steps. The first step for Umrah, there are 4 steps for Umrah. Everything else is just details. The legalities, they're details that are important, but there are 4 major steps. The first is entering into the state of what's called ihram. So that's the first step, entering into ihram. The second step is the tawaf around the Kaaba, the circumambulation, the circuits around the Kaaba. The third step is the sa'i, so to go back and forth between Safa and Marwa. And the last step is exiting ihram. So that's what makes up Umrah. Everything else we're going into is like prerequisites for it, or things to prepare for it, or the intention that we have to have, or what specific actions we take, and so on, right? So that's important to recognize. So what is ihram? Ihram, a lot of people think it's the clothes that especially the men wear. But ihram is actually a state that we're entering into. It's a state of ritual purity. We're trying to enter into a state of purity. And so the first thing is that we'll go into what specific clothing that we have to wear in ihram, and what the permissible acts are and prohibited acts are. But before we enter ihram, there are things that we can't do after. And so it's recommended, right? These are things that are recommended to do beforehand. And inshallah, we'll be in Medina before we go to Mecca. And so this can be done largely in the hotel room, right? Before we head out. The first is to focus on our personal hygiene. And it's specifically things like clipping nails, trimming and removing hair. Another thing that's really recommended is to make ghusl, right? To take a shower beforehand. If one is unable to make ghusl, for example, if they're not coming from Medina, they're going from another part of the world, flying into Mecca or to Jeddah, then they can perform wudu, they can make wudu at the airport. But ideally, you make ghusl. And another thing that's recommended to do is to put on etir, fragrance, and deodorant onto the body. Let me just make sure I can mute this one. Oh, actually, I'm not able to. Miss May said, thank you. So putting fragrance on. And I want to emphasize that it's on the body and not the clothes. One of the restrictions for ihram is that you don't have fragrance on your clothes, but before you enter into ihram, to put it on the body is something that's recommended, and it's good to do. So this is all before you enter into the state of ihram, the physical purity and hygiene and purification that one should do before they enter into the state of ihram. The second thing is specifically the garments, right? What to wear. Now, with women, there's very few restrictions. There's no specific clothing or footwear that women have to wear. And I think our group, the women, will wear the same clothes, so we're able to easily identify and keep the group together. But the things that we should keep in mind is that women should wear modest clothing, and this applies to men as well. And the only restriction is that a woman's hands and face has to be exposed, right? A woman cannot wear gloves, and if she wears niqab, she's not able to wear niqab in the state of ihram. So that's the only restrictions for women. For men, there are a couple more restrictions. Specifically, there's a specific garb that men have to wear, which a lot of people refer to as the ihram. These are 2 clean pieces of white unstitched cloth. And unstitched means that it's not shaped to the body in a specific way, right? And so there's the bottom garment that is called the izar. The izar wraps around the waist and it covers the lower part of the body. And then there's the rida, which is draped over the upper body, and it covers the shoulder and the chest, right? And so you can see an image here of what that looks like, right? And so this is the clothing that the man will wear in the state of ihram. It's really important not to wear any stitched clothing at all. And so you would not even wear underwear in specifically in the state of ihram. We can, if people have questions, I'll go over a few things and then we can come back to this, inshallah. Another specific part to the garment that a lot of people put a lot of attention to is the footwear. So for women, there's no restrictions. Women can wear whatever footwear they'd like to wear, inshallah. But with men's footwear, there's some rules around it, right? One of the restrictions is that it can't cover the heel and the ankle, right? The heel, not the bottom of the heel, but the upper part of the heel, right? The ankle cannot be covered. And then there are differences of opinion amongst the different madhahib. So to be safe, I'll provide a couple of options here. But another major thing that many of the scholars say is that it should not cover the instep of the foot. So the upper part of the foot should stay exposed. So that's where the shoelaces of the foot would be. And so ideally, you're not wearing shoes, you're wearing sandals that keep part of it exposed. And the Shafi'i madhab specifically, there's a recommendation that the toes are also exposed, but the other madhab are not that strict about it. Usually the most strict thing is the heels are exposed, and in some cases, the upper part of the foot are exposed. And so here are some options of what people can wear. These kinds of shoes down here are good because they stay stuck to the foot, right? And they have straps around it. As long as the straps don't cover much of the foot, that's fine. These examples of Birkenstocks are also an option. There is a bit of a gray area because it does cover some part of the upper part of the foot, but most of the scholars say that it's perfectly permissible to wear shoes like this. One recommendation that I have, having performed Umrah in these in the past, is that they tend to be a bit heavy. And so one of the things to consider is that, you'll be walking a lot, right? It's multiple miles that you'll be walking in the course of Umrah. And so you want to make sure that you're wearing something comfortable. And some people even they'll do Umrah barefoot, right? The place is kept very clean, and so some people will do it barefoot. But if you'd like to wear shoes, I'd recommend that you don't wear something too heavy. Another option that has been recommended, flip-flops are perfectly permissible, and these are a specific type of flip-flops that are very comfortable. I haven't worn them in the past, but people have recommended it. The last type of footwear that I actually prefer myself and I tend to wear, and because the Hanafis are not strict about the toes not being exposed. These are in Turkey, they call these tawaf shoes. And so they're basically like hoofs, but they're, kind of smaller. And you can see there's a large opening for that instep of the foot, that front part of the foot. And so you can potentially get these. I don't know if that shipping would be in time, but if someone's interested, this is a potential form of footwear that is acceptable and comfortable to wear. It's largely barefoot, but it does cover the feet, inshallah. So these are some of the points around the garments and footwear. Does anyone have any questions before we move on?
Yes, actually, Sister Fatima, she's asking if they are allowed to wear masks since you said no niqab. So what about the mask, please?
So you're not supposed to wear a mask. That's the general ruling. However, if there's a requirement to wear a mask, so for example, during COVID, if you watch videos, you'll see that the people were wearing masks. That was an injunction from the government and the state, and there were particular reasons for it. But otherwise, you're not supposed to wear a mask during ihram, in the state of ihram. So, wa alaikum salam. You have a question? Bismillah. Any other questions? All right, we can continue then, inshallah. Okay, so continuing on being in the state of ihram, let me try to see here. What is prohibited in ihram, right? Ihram literally means things that, the haram, we say the haram, the sacred place, is because certain things are impermissible in that space, right? And then specifically in the state of ihram, other things are impermissible. And between the two of them, these are the things that are prohibited that one can engage in. So one of them is intimacy, right? And that's one that's, people have to be careful around. There's and in case any of these are violated, there's specific things that have to be done So, for example, a sacrifice has to be made of an animal or sadaqah has to be paid depending on the specific prohibition. I don't want to go into too much detail about which one requires what. If anyone has questions about that during our journey, they can definitely approach me and but this is just a general ruling. So the first one is intimacy, right? Intimacy, romance with the partner, right? This is physical intimacy. This is any form of sexual intimacy, but even verbal, romantic, and that doesn't mean like, praising one's spouse or something, but specifically sexual speech and so on and so forth. That would be prohibited to do in the state of ihram. The second is fighting amongst each other, arguing, right? And then specifically within the haram, carrying weapons, right? That's also not permissible in the state of ihram. The idea is you're coming to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're free of everything, right? You're not even carrying any arms, right? The third is applying fragrance. And so this is very strict. And a lot of the reasons that people need to pay an expiation is because they accidentally put on fragrance. And so it's really important that, everything that you put on is unscented, right? You even try to get unscented soap. You don't try to use soap with fragrance. And I do want to share that there is slight difference between what's a fragrance and what's scented. Sometimes you have a bar of soap that's unscented, but you can still smell something on it. That's fine. This is specifically fragrance that's added on. And so perfume, you can look at the ingredients. A lot of times there's fragrance that's added on. So any type of fragrance on top of what the natural smell of something is, right? So toothpaste is fine as well, but the fragrance that is in soap and shampoo and so on would be problematic. One recommendation is potentially to take some unscented soap to have it while you're in the state of ihram. Clipping nails, removing hair, these are also impermissible. So you can't trim or shave, you can't pluck hair, you can't clip your nails. For men specifically, wearing stitched clothing, so any form of garment, undergarment that is stitched, that is shaped to the body would be impermissible. Covering the head is also impermissible for men. So no kufis or hats in the state of ihram. Hunting or killing an animal in the state of ihram or within the haram is also not permissible, except for a dangerous animal. For example, a scorpion, that would potentially be permissible if you kill a scorpion or a snake. But aside from that, you wouldn't be hunting or killing any animals. Damaging trees or vegetations within the haram would also be impermissible. You'd have to pay sadaqah for that. And lastly, covering the face, as we've mentioned, which includes masks for the most part, inshallah. So these are the things that are prohibited in the state of ihram. And then I'll go to the permissible and I'll see if anyone has any questions. So what's permissible in the state of ihram? The first is changing clothes. So you can change clothes. Women can change into whatever they'd like in the state of ihram. And for men, you can swap out one pair of ihram for another if necessary. Another thing that's permissible is wearing a backpack or a bag or a pack or having a purse, something like that, to carry valuables, important things. And I think we'll be provided some bags to keep our shoes in and so on and so forth. So that's perfectly fine. And wearing accessories, for example, having a ring, wearing glasses, having a hearing aid, having a belt, a money belt or something, wearing a watch. These are all perfectly permissible and okay. They're not necessarily garments. Washing the body is perfectly fine. Taking a shower is fine, as long as you're not using something scented or perfumed. And then brushing your teeth is fine too. Using a miswak is considered a sunnah. Using an umbrella. These are all things that are permissible in the state of ihram. Any questions about prohibitions or permissible things in the state of ihram? Inshallah. Okay, Bismillah. We can continue. So now that was a lot of the technical details. Let's discuss what it means to enter into the state of ihram and how one does, right? The first thing is those things in advance. You're wearing a certain set of garments. You are not doing certain things and so on, right? You purify yourself, right? So in the state of ihram, basically you don't enter ihram until you arrive at a place called the miqat point. And so there are a couple of places around the region, around Mecca, around Arabia, that are called the mawaqit, right? These are the places where one makes the intention and enters into ihram. Specifically, there are five that you can see here. And so these are places that are outer boundaries of where one is in the state of ihram. And specifically, this line over here is what's called the haram. And so these are the sacred precincts outside of the Kaaba, outside of the masjid, like what Masjid al-Haram is. And then this is the ihram area, if that makes sense. So there are two kind of spaces to keep in mind. One is, the ihram area, and one is the haram itself, if that makes sense. And so what happens is before you enter into ihram, you first, it's sunnah to perform salah, two rak'ahs specifically, and it's recommended in the first rak'ah to recite Surah Kafirun, in the second rak'ah to recite Surah Ikhlas, very similar to many other prayers that we pray periodically. For example, the Sunnah Fajr, these are the recommendations there. And so what'll likely happen is that we actually wear the clothes, you purify ourselves, all of that in the hotel in Medina, and then we head towards the train station. Before we get on the train, we'll probably pray the Salatul Ihram and offer these two sunnah prayers. And and then the next thing that we do is we make the intention. And so it's very important to make the intention. There's a difference among the madhahib of, does it have to be vocalized or is it sunnah and so on. But ideally, everyone makes the intention and they verbalize it, right? So you say, labbaik Allahumma umrah, that I intend, oh Allah, I am here, I'm at your service to perform umrah, that inni uridu al-umrah, that I intend to perform umrah, and that, Allahumma inni uridu al-umrata fayassirha li taqabbalha minni. That I intend to perform umrah, so make it easy for me and accept it for me. So, any one of these would suffice, but just to be safe, we can recite all of this and vocalize it and verbalize it, right? So this is the intention that we have to make or that we make before we enter into umrah. And the way that we specifically enter into the state of ihram is reciting the talbiyah. So saying labbaik Allahumma labbaik labbaik la sharika laka labbaik innal hamda wa ni'mata lak wal mulk. We're telling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, here we are at your service, here we are, right? And so this, when you recite this, you officially entered into the state of ihram. And again, the significance of this is that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam to build a Kaaba. And once they build it, Ibrahim was meant to send an invitation out, right, to people all over the world to come and perform pilgrimage to this, temple of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we do so, we're responding to the call of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and we're coming to the Kaaba, to at the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? To come with open hearts towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this is a really important statement that we make. It enters us into ihram. And the recommendation is from this point all the way until we, see the Kaaba and we're about to perform tawaf and begin the Umrah proper, that we continue to recite this. And so it could be a few hours, it could be a long period of time, depending on how long it takes to get to Mecca and enter the Haram. So it's recommended that we continue to recite this and keep saying this repeatedly, inshallah. Any questions before we move on? All right, Bismillah. So now, you're in the state of Ihram, we're taking the train, we enter into Mecca. This is a dua that is recommended to recite as we enter Mecca. And so there'll be a point where we've entered the city of Mecca, and inshallah, I'll encourage everyone to recite this dua. As we enter the city of Mecca, inshallah. And so after we enter Mecca, there might be some time, we'll have to see the logistics and then the itinerary of how quickly we'll perform Umrah. But, once we, make this dua, we enter Mecca, we might settle down at the hotel, we might prepare ourselves to performing the steps of Umrah, Tawaf, and Sa'i. And so in this interim, saying labbaik is really important, doing the talbiyah is important, preparing ourselves spiritually and so on and so forth. But there is like an interim period before this, right? Now, once we've prepared ourselves, we're going to actually enter Masjid al-Haram and start the steps of Umrah. Very likely we'll be in a group together, and the men will be outside the group and the women will be inside, just to keep everyone together and make sure that we can kind of be together as we perform all of these things, right? And inshallah, after we form our group, we'll be heading into Masjid al-Haram. The sunnah is to enter via a specific gate called Bab al-Salam. And, I think there's restrictions. And so we'll be entering through gate 79. And the recommendation is just like anytime you enter a masjid, to enter with the right foot first. And of course, this is the most important masjid, so we should take these things more seriously than we ever do. To enter with the right foot first, and then recite the dua of entering a masjid. Bismillah, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, Allahumma gfirli, waftah li abwab rahmatik. Oh Allah, send salawat, and then forgive me and open the doors, right? Iftah li abwab rahmatik, open the doors of your mercy as we enter the masjid, right? Oops. And then there's another dua that we can make as well. And inshallah, I'll share all of these dua before we go there. Maybe I'll make a different form or try to make it something that's printable. So this is another dua that we can make as we enter the masjid, inshallah. And then as we make ourselves towards the mataf, so the mataf area is the open area where people are performing tawaf, we should keep our gaze lowered. And so we shouldn't look ahead. We should try to keep our gaze lowered, humbly walk towards the Kaaba. And I know for many of you, this might be the first time you're seeing the Kaaba in person. And even if it's not the first time, it's an incredible and powerful experience. And so you should prepare yourself for it to know that, you've been praying in this direction 5 times a day for most of your entire adult life, right? Most of your life. And for you to now be able to actually witness it and see it. And so you should kind of walk and once you're there, be in a state of humility and reverence. And then you, once you're just at the mataf area, you lift your eyes and you see the Kaaba. And the Prophet ﷺ taught us that looking at the Kaaba is a form of worship, right? Just looking at it is a form of worship. The Prophet ﷺ loved the Kaaba, right? One of the things that broke his heart about leaving for the hijrah was to be able to not be able to see the Kaaba anymore. And so we should view it as a form of worship, and it should move us and touch us emotionally. When we see the Kaaba, we should say Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. And then there's a dua that's here that's also very beautiful. That we should recite. And one thing to recognize and know is at this moment, du'as are accepted, right? When we were first witnessing the Kaaba. And so in addition to these du'as that we recite, you should do dhikr, salawat, and you really take your time to make as many du'as as you can, ask for an accepted umrah and all of these things, inshallah. So these are some du'as that we should make once we see the Kaaba. And then we'll get into the steps of tawaf and sa'i proper. Any questions before we move on? Someone asked to entering the Kaaba slide again. Entering the Kaaba, seeing the Kaaba. Someone asked to see that. And subhanAllah, in this dua, Allahumma zid hadha al-bayta tashrifan. We're asking Allah to bless, his Kaaba, right? His house, right? And we're actually making dua for the Kaaba. It's very powerful. So the two major steps of the Umrah, first, the before this is entering the state of Ihram, the last is exiting Ihram. The major steps are Tawaf and Sa'i. And so these we'll spend a bit of time on what Tawaf al-Umrah means. So the first thing is that we have to be in a state of wudu to perform Tawaf. And so before we even enter the Haram, we should be in a state of wudu. The Sa'i doesn't require wudu, but this part of the Umrah, we should be in a state of Umrah. If we lose our wudu, we should go make wudu and come back and continue where we left off, right? So that's really important to emphasize that we're in a state of wudu. The first thing that we'll talk about is the intention for performing tawaf. The second is istilam, or I'll explain what that is. The third part is the circuits going around the Kaaba, right? Performing the circumambulation, which is a very, it's an English word, but there are some words in the English language that only Muslims use. And so this is one of those words, right? Ablution is one of them, lustration, another, circumambulation. So this means to circumambulate, to go around the Kaaba. And for men, it's sunnah to do two things, especially in the first three circuits of the tawaf. The first is called ramal, which is like walking with a sense of purpose and with a degree of intensity. The Prophet ﷺ encouraged the Sahaba to do this because there were a lot of kuffar that were there, and he wanted to show that these men are people of strength, right? And so we continue that sunnah today. This might be difficult if there's a lot of people in the mataf area, and it might be very difficult because we're in a group and we want to keep the men and women together. But I would encourage us as men, inshallah, in the first three, at least try to be a little more vigorous, a little more intense as we walk around and do the tawaf. The second thing that's sunnah is ittiba. Ittiba. It's a difficult word to pronounce. There's a dad and a ta. This is specifically uncovering the left shoulder. And so you'll notice that the rida that you put on the upper garment, you usually cover both shoulders, but specifically for the first three circuits, it's recommended to uncover the shoulder, inshallah. So this is something we'll remind people to do as we perform tawaf at the beginning. So very quickly, here's a diagram of what the area looks like. And there's obviously a lot more things here, but here I'm just emphasizing the most important things. The start of the tawaf happens at a place right here. So there's one corner of the Kaaba is the black stone. Another corner is called the Iraqi corner because it faces Iraq. Another corner is the Shami corner, faces Sham. And the last one is called the Yemeni corner, Rukn al-Yamani, because it faces Yemen. And so these are the four corners of the Kaaba. The tawaf begins here. So they're between the black stone, and now they've put some green fluorescent lights at the end. And so between that area is where the tawaf begins, right? And you make your way counterclockwise around to perform a circuit. Here, there's a really important place called Maqam Ibrahim. We'll talk about that in just a bit. And lastly, there's an area here. It's called the Hijr, or the theme. This is an important place because originally the Kaaba was actually a rectangle. And then when they were reconstructing it, they didn't have enough supplies or money. And so they actually made it a square. And so they left this part open. It's closed off, but there's a part which is not physically inside the structure. It's really important that when you're performing tawaf, you don't go inside the hijr, right? Sometimes in the day, they'll open it up and you can actually pray inside it. And this is actually a beautiful thing because it gives the average person the opportunity to technically pray inside the Kaaba. My grandfather, he performed Hajj over 30 times in his life. He used to lead many groups and he actually got a chance to pray inside the Kaaba. And I have, a wish and desire one day, inshallah, I get the chance to do the same. But if you want to be able to pray technically inside the Kaaba, you can actually pray inside this Hijr area. But when you're performing tawaf, you should go around it. So that's important. So this is kind of what the outline of the mataf area is, and the Kaaba in the center, and where it begins and where it ends, right? Where the tawaf technically refers to doing all 7 circuits. So each circuit's not called tawaf. You're you're performing tawaf as you do it, right? But it begins in this area. And so to begin, first you want to make the intention for tawaf. You verbalize that. So you say that, Allah, I intend to perform tawaf. So make it easy for me and accept it for me. So you make the intention. And inshallah, as we go, I'll be reciting all of these, and so people can follow along, and you'll have a copy as well. This is just to give you an idea of what will be happening, inshallah. The next really important part is that you make your way to the beginning, this area over here between the black stone and the green lights, and you do what's called istilam. And the sunnah is to actually kiss the black stone. And if you're not able to kiss it, to touch it. Now, realistically, this is going to be near impossible, especially during, as we begin our tawaf and we're in a group. And so the next best thing is to kind of salute the black stone, to say Bismillahi wallahu akbar, la ilaha illallah wa lillahi alhamd, with our palms outstretched, like we're saluting, we're saying salam to the black stone, and then to say that and then kiss your hand. That's called istilam, and that's every single circuit that you'll be doing, you begin with that. With that process specifically. Now, alhamdulillah, last year during tawaf later, I was able to go and kiss the black stone. And it was a very intense experience. So a couple things to keep in mind if someone does want to do so is that one is very physically demanding. I have some back problems now. I don't know if I'd be able to do it now. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Second is that it's very difficult to do so without, a lot of people are kicking and shoving and, these are things that are not from the adab of performing Umrah and they're not good to do. And so just keep that in mind. I made a dua before I even attempted to do so that, I don't want to do this at the cost of earning your wrath, Allah. Like I don't want to hurt anyone or push anyone or anything of the sort. So it's very difficult to do. It's possible. Perhaps in the second Umrah, people can attempt to do so. But just the general, tawaf, we won't be able to touch the black stone as we're making the circuits. And so we do istilam from a distance between the green light and the black stone, inshallah. Continuing on, this is another dua that Ali radiallahu used to make at the beginning, the first time he's doing istilam. He says, Bismillahi Allahu Akbar, Allahumma imaman bika وتصديقا بكتابك ووفاء بعهدك واتباعا لسنة نبيك Muhammad. So this is something that we can say, inshallah, at the beginning, the first istilam that we do as we start tawaf, inshallah. Any questions? Anyone want me to clarify or review anything? Bismillah. All right, we can continue. So during the tawaf itself, and I want to really emphasize this, there's not a specific dua or dhikr that we should make, except for one exception that I'll get to in a second. And so there's a lot of things that you could recite, a lot of things you could do. You could do salawat, you could do dhikr, you could recite Quran. These are all fair game. They're open to do so. There are also books out there. There are guides of duas to recite and read. My recommendation would be, read from your heart, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you this opportunity to visit his Kaaba, his house, right? In this state, I would recommend that we prepare ourselves beforehand. So maybe before we go, we read up on it, we come across some du'as, we prepare ourselves. But once we're there to be reading off, a bunch of litanies, your heart might not be into it. And so I would recommend that we read from our heart. What I will do, inshallah, is I will have recommendations for each of the circuits that we go around. I'll share that these are things that we could do, but just keep in mind that it's all fair game, and just do whatever comes from your heart. And it could be in any language as well. It doesn't have to be in Arabic specifically. So that's my recommendation for during the tawaf, the dua that we make. Specifically, there's a corner here, Rukn al-Yamani, the Yemeni corner. This corner to the black stone, the sunnah is to recite the dua, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. So that's one dua that I would recommend. The only two things you really need to memorize for Umrah, everything else can mostly be read off, is that talbiyah, labbaik Allahumma labbaik. I would recommend everyone memorize that so that they can frequently continue to say it. And then specifically here, as they're going from one corner to another, they know this dua as well. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً. So to recite this dua is recommended. And so as we perform our 7 circuits in this, area, this quarter of the circuit, we should be reciting this dua as much as possible, inshallah. And then after we approach the black stone, we've completed a circuit, we just say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. And we do continue to istilam. And people will be doing it. Basically, put your arm out towards the black stone and say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. And you do that a total of 8 times. So you do it the first time you start the tawaf, and then you do it every circuit, and then last when you end the tawaf as well. So that's the process of tawaf itself. Does anyone have any questions about that? So you can hold your phone. Someone asked if they can hold their phone while doing this to read off. So that is a possibility. And inshallah, I'll send a lot of these dua for you to be able to read off. At the same time, there's something nice about not carrying your phone or not having your phone. One of the scholars, one of my teachers, he was mentioning, like, you should turn off your phone if possible. Like, you want to unplug from the rest of the world. You don't want to be distracted by social media or any of that. And so ideally, if it's printed, that's my recommendation. I've printed in the past and I've used that. So it's not haram to have your phone, but I think it'd be better to potentially either memorize or try to read off paper if possible. But it is permissible to have your phone and potentially use it for this purpose, inshallah. Any other questions? All right. So inshallah, that's 7 circuits that you'll perform around the Kaaba. And then lastly, you will, after you finish the tawaf, it's sunnah. Again, a lot of these are sunan. They're not required. Tawaf, sa'i are required. Entering into ihram, exiting ihram. A lot of these are sunan in between. Is to pray salah, right? 2 rakahs of nafil salah after completing the tawaf. And the place to do this ideally is behind Maqam Ibrahim. And so here you can see there's a structure. It's a golden structure. You'll see it as you're in the mataf area. And then here you'll see that, pull it up here. It's close to the Kaaba. It's called Maqam Ibrahim. This area houses a stone which has the footprints of our blessed forefather Ibrahim alayhi salam, and it was used for him during the construction of the Kaaba. And so it's recommended to pray right behind it. And so it's in between you and the Kaaba. Now, again, this is in the mataf area. Usually it's crowded. It's near impossible to pray there. So it's recommended to pray, somewhere behind it, anywhere behind it, right? So if you can find a space that you can comfortably pray behind it, praying these 2 rakahs is important. And to also verbalize, this is something, this is ayah of Quran, وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. Actually, I think this is a hadith, the Prophet take the maqam of Ibrahim as a place of prayer, a place of salah. It's good to verbalize that as well. So I'll encourage everyone to do that, inshallah. And then after you do tawaf, you perform the salah, it's good to go get some Zamzam water to drink. And so when you're in Makkah and Medina, there are a lot of water containers, and all the water is from Zamzam. In the past, people would actually go down to the well and get it, but now they make it available. And so you go get a cup of Zamzam water. Another thing I'd recommend is actually carrying a water bottle with you. When you're eating, when you're having breakfast or lunch and you're at a hotel, like, you don't want to be drinking bottled water from Paris, right? You want ideally to drink Zamzam water. So, carrying a bottle with you, filling it up with Zamzam water, something I'd recommend during the whole trip. So you take the Zamzam, you face the Kaaba. And again, this is one of the accepted times of dua. And so you make dua, you make as much dua as you can, and you specifically ask for acceptance, and you ask that Allah accepts all the dua that you make in the future. So to make dua, and then specifically here's a dua that is recommended to make So you recite this dua and then you drink from Zamzam, inshallah. So that's another thing that's recommended in this process. And I'll use that as an excuse to drink some water as well, inshallah. Any questions? Bismillah. All right. And the beautiful thing is, it's sunnah to face the Qibla during drinking any water, but specifically to be able to see the Kaaba before you is a really surreal and incredible experience. And so praying Salah, then Zamzam. The next step, which unfortunately would be very difficult to do, there is an area called the Multazam, which is specifically, if you see here, this is the Kaaba, this is the black stone over here, where the people are in this corner, and this is the door of the Kaaba. The multazam is the area between this, right? Not actually at the door, but between the black stone and the door. It's about maybe 3 or 4 feet, around 2 meters. This area is really blessed. And the sunnah is actually to go up to it, cling to the wall, press your chest and your cheeks against it, and make dua. And take your time making dua and doing that, right? Unfortunately, given the crowds and the difficulty, it'd be near impossible to do this. So it's permissible to, face it and supplicate and make dua from a distance. And then what you do is you make your way to the black stone again, and you perform a final istilam. So this is the ninth one that you'll be doing. You face the black stone and you say Bismillah wallahu Akbar, and then you continue on to the next major step of Umrah, which is towards Safa to perform the sa'i. Any questions? Bismillah. All right. So continuing on, the next major component of Umrah is performing sa'i, which is to go back and forth between the two mountains, Safa and Marwa. And the significance of this, again, we're following the footsteps of our forefathers, our spiritual ancestors, right? We might not be physically, biologically related to them. Perhaps we are, but really the more important thing is that we are spiritually connected to them. That Ibrahim alayhi salam, our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hajar alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam, these are our spiritual ancestors. And so to follow in the footsteps of this incredible woman, Hajar alayhi salam, who was left in the middle of the desert, right, with an infant child, with no provision whatsoever, at the command of Allah, for Ibrahim alayhi salam to do that and be willing to do that, and Hajar alayhi salam to be willing to accept that is an incredible thing. And then the miracle of Zamzam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessing, Ismail alayhi salam and Hajar alayhi salam with the water. And then functionally, she became like the first mayor of Mecca, right? Everyone, the civilization always starts around rivers, around water. All of Mecca became a place that it was because of this incredible well that existed, right? And so we specifically in this point, we're emulating going back between Safa and Marwa, back and forth between the two of them. And you can see here, this Safa is one mountain, Marwa is another mountain. It's about 2 miles altogether. So you're performing a circuit 7 times around it. And another thing to keep in mind is there's this green area here. There's some green lights. And the recommendation is that this is where Hajar Assam would pick up her pace. And so the recommendation for men is to do the same, to kind of jog lightly or speed up a little bit between these two areas. For women, it's not recommended to do so, but that's something that is recommended for men. Apologize, 1 second. All right, so that's let me get into the details of sa'i and what you do. So after you perform, the final istilam, you've done your tawaf, you make your way to the second area towards Safa and Marwa. So as you approach Safa, we should recite this, right? Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah. That Safa and Marwa are the signs of Allah, from the signs of Allah. This is from the Quran. And then we say this once, just once, not the entire time, but just once. Abda'u bima badallahu bi. I begin with that which Allah began, right? So the Prophet ﷺ taught us to say this as we approach Safa and as we begin the sa'i, to say this, right? And we do this as we're approaching Safa. Once we're at Safa and Marwa, every time we get to one of them, we should face the Kaaba and make dua. And so there's, no restriction for the dua that you can make. You can take your time and make dua. And by this point, in the Umrah, during Tawaf, we stay together as a group, but most people by Safa and Marwa, it might be smaller groups, but there's not one big group. And so you're kind of at your own pace here, right? Some people may take more time. It ends up being a lot of walking, right? So some people take more time, some people take less time. So you're not in a rush to you can make as much dua as you want. But facing the Kaaba, and I provided some dua here that's recommended to recite 3 times each. And then in addition to that, you can recite salawat, dhikr, adhkar, and so on and so forth, inshallah. So you're making these dua every time. You start at Safa, you make dua, you face the Kaaba, then you head towards Marwa, you do the same thing, you face the Kaaba, you make dua, and then you go back to Safa. And you do this a total of 7 times. The last time you'll end up at Marwa. Um, and at Marwa, you're there, and then there's a place to exit. And so before you exit, you make your final dua, right? You ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness for all of your past sins, and that this Umrah is accepted, right? You're just at the cusp of finishing Umrah. You've been invited to do all these rituals. And so you pray that it's not just, you did a lot of exercise, it's accepted from you, inshallah. So make a lot of dua at this point. And then it's sunnah to pray 2 rakahs as well before you exit the Masjid al-Haram. And there's a place there at Marwa that you can just exit from. And the last thing, as you step out of the masjid, it's the sunnah of leaving a masjid is one to step out with your left foot, and then Allahumma inni as'aluka min fadlik to make the dua. Oh Allah, I ask you of your bounty. Right, so that's how you leave the haram. And once you leave the haram, the last step to do is to exit the state of ihram. Right, the last of the 4 steps of Umrah is to exit the state of ihram is a halq or taqsir. And basically, halq is to shave the head, and taqsir is to trim the hair. And for women, it's haram. It's actually not. You're not supposed to shave the head, so you would trim. And so one of the things that might be packed is scissors. You could do this in the hotel rooms, and you can help each other trim your hair a little bit. For men, the same thing, but it's actually recommended that men shave the head completely. And there's a really funny hadith of the Prophet, something that was narrated from the Sahaba, that the Prophet after they had performed Umrah, started making dua, and he said, "Oh Allah, be merciful to those who shaved their head." And all of the men who didn't shave the head completely, they just trimmed. They said, and to ask the Prophet, can you add on for those who cut the hair short as well? Oh Allah, be merciful to those who cut their hair short as well. The Prophet repeated, "Oh Allah, have mercy on those who have shaved their head." And they asked it again, and he didn't do that. So he did this 3 times. In the 4th time, he said, "Oh Allah, have mercy on those who get their head shaved, and to those have their hair cut short." And the idea behind this is the Prophet is really encouraging us to shave our head, to not be caught up with appearance and so on, to really submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do this. And so my recommendation would be for all the men to do this, inshallah, to shave your head completely. My wife isn't too excited about the idea, and so I'm kind of going back and forth and trying to figure out. Alhamdulillah, I was able to perform Umrah last year, and so one of the recommendations is that the Prophet said anyone who has been given the means and the health to perform Hajj and Umrah, they should try to visit me once every 5 years. And so they say that it's good to try to do Hajj or Umrah at least every 5 years. And so I'm thinking maybe every 5 years, maybe I'll shave my head, and definitely during Hajj. So I'm still debating that myself, and I want to set a good example though. So inshallah, we'll see if I end up shaving my head completely. But that's my recommendation to all of you men, inshallah. And so with that, that's the last step. Once you've done that, and as soon as you exit, for the men especially, there are a lot of people. Some people are shaving their hair right away, right outside the haram. There's a lot of barber shops in the area too. You won't even have to find them. They'll find you and they'll take you to do that, inshallah. After you do that, you're outside of the state of ihram. You can live your life now. There are no restrictions and prohibitions aside from the restrictions of the haram itself, but you're no longer in a state of ihram, and so everything else becomes permissible for you. So that is the steps and the journey of Umrah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our intention to perform Umrah, allow us to be able to do it, make it easy for us, inshallah, and accept it once it's done. Ameen, inshallah. I hope that covered everything. Recommendations for people using wheelchairs. That's a very good question. There's no problem with using a wheelchair. There are designated areas in the haram for people using wheelchairs, and there's even people that can help, go around it. And not only that, there's like golf carts. There are some areas that you can do tawaf in a golf cart. That's not recommended for someone who's able to walk, but if someone's unable to, that's an option as well. And not only that, the people there will actually give you the du'at and so on that you have to recite and read in the process. And so that would be good. good, inshallah. Yes, inshallah. I will send a copy of this presentation. And another thing that I'll try to do is I will try to condense this presentation for just the du'as in a form that's easy so that, it can be pulled up on a phone or printed out for us to go there, inshallah. Any other questions, thoughts, comments, concerns? This is a good question. Can you do multiple umrahs without returning to the miqat? So no, you have to return to the miqat to get into the state of ihram again. There's a specific masjid. It's called Masjid Tan'im or Masjid Aisha. That's not too far, maybe like a 20, 30-minute drive away from the haram, where people who are local to Mecca, they can go there to enter into the state of ihram to perform umrah. It's very likely that as a group, we will perform umrah together. Perform twice. That's what we did last year. At the same time, the recommendation is not necessarily to do it more than once, right? Like I know it's a long journey. We don't get an opportunity to do it. We might want to do it more than once. But I remember an elderly gentleman, he saw that I had performed Umrah twice and he was kind of questioning, why I did so. And so, inshallah, we can do it as a group. There's not necessarily harm in it. But some people, think that, you should just do it once. But very likely we'll go to Masjid Aisha, Masjid Tanaim, and then enter into state of Ihram and perform a second Umrah while we're there. Are men allowed to shave their heads in the hotel room? Yes, you can do that as well. So if you'd like, if one of your friends is a barber or good at cutting hair, or it's very easy to shave your head, you can go back to the hotel room and cut your hair. That's permissible as well. Any other questions?
Can they do the haircut or shaving by themselves, or someone should do it for them?
So my understanding, and I read this fairly recently, is that you can trim or cut your own hair. But I'd have to double check on that. I heard it. I just want to make sure that that's the case. Another thing that, you can ask someone else to do it and help each other do that. And yes, you can take a taxi to the masjid to perform the second Umrah. I think last year we took a bus. So either a taxi or a bus, you can do that. My recommendation would be not to do it more than twice. But, I think you could do that.
Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, we have scheduled on the third day when we're in Mecca to have a bus to take us to Masjid Aisha, inshallah, in the evening. And if anyone wishes to do more, then you would have to take a taxi. But like what Ustaz Yusuf said, inshallah, there will be another scheduled Umrah on the third day we're there, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
How are we going from Medina to Mecca?
Inshallah, we'll be taking the Haramain train. Instead of in the past, when we first started the ACA Umrah, it was by bus. The past few Umrahs, alhamdulillah, we've been blessed to take the Haramain train, which is about a 2-hour and 15-minute train ride versus a 6-hour bus ride.
Okay, so do they allow our large bags in that train?
No, our bags will be picked up the night before, and we're going to be going through all this, inshallah, in detail during our mandatory meeting. And we'll explain all the things that are going to take place, inshallah, and also send reminders while we're there in Medina Munawwara and Makkah Mukarramah.
Okay.
So some good questions that are being asked. One of them is, how do you do Umrah on behalf of someone else? And all you have to do is make intention. From my understanding, you just have to make an intention that you're performing this Umrah on behalf of someone else. And once you do so, you perform the Umrah, it'll be counted as such. So there's not that many restrictions around that, inshallah. Another good question is, if you get shoved around or touched by the opposite gender while you're in a state of ihram, do you have to remake your wudu? It's a very good question. And this is one point of disagreement amongst the scholars in the different madhahib. From my understanding, only in the Shafi'i madhab do they say that if you're touched by the opposite gender, you lose your wudu. So technically in the Hanafi madhab, the Hanbali madhab, Maliki madhab, accidentally or intentionally touching the opposite gender, i.e. your spouse, doesn't nullify your wudu, only intimacy or relations would nullify your wudu. So in this case, even the Shafi scholars, just because being practical and realistic, it's nearly impossible to do this without accidentally coming into contact with the opposite gender. We try our best, and we'll try to form that circle around the sisters to prevent that from happening. But if it happens, I would say that take the majority position or the position of the other madhab. Don't count it as you have to remake your wudu, because otherwise it'll make your life very difficult. It'll make Umrah very difficult, and Hajj nearly impossible. Another question is, actually, no, that was it. Touch has to be skin to skin. Yes. So I think even clothing touching wouldn't necessarily nullify the wudu. Yeah, have to do wudu the Hanafi way. So just do wudu, trying to follow the sunnah as closely as possible. And inshallah, it'll be counted in the Shafi and Hanafi madhab. And then, yeah, that shouldn't be too much of a problem, inshallah.
Sister Sana, she's asking, first Umrah has to be for self. So it will be someone. So if
yes, the recommendation would be that if you're performing Umrah for the first time ever, then you do it for yourself. However, if you've done it before, the first time could be on behalf of someone else as well in this case.
Walid is asking, can we do one Umrah on behalf of many people at the same time?
It's a very good question. I'd have to double check on this. My understanding is that you can't. You intend one person specifically, but I can double check on this question, inshallah, and get back to you. Allahu alam.
Sister Rasha, you're asking they have to do wudu Hanafi way. What do you mean, Sister Rasha?
I can just clear.
Yeah, go ahead, Ustaz Yusuf.
I think the understanding is that in the Shafi madhab, if you're accidentally in contact with the opposite gender, you lose your wudu. And so I was saying that the other madhab, the Hanafi madhab, for example, doesn't have that restriction. And so to follow that, I would advise that people follow that position, specifically when they're performing Umrah, even if outside of Umrah, they don't follow that position. So she was saying that they should do wudu in the Hanafi way, which, I think that's acceptable. The differences when it comes to wudu between the madhahib are not that many. For example, and I don't want to get too much into detail, but the Shafi madhab requires that one makes an intention. The Hanafi madhab doesn't. And so to be safe, you can make the intention. It's sunnah to make the intention. In the Hanafi madhab, you don't have to make wudu in a certain order, but in the Shafi madhab, you have to make it in a certain order. So I would just recommend everyone makes intention for making wudu, makes wudu in the correct order, following the sunnah as closely as possible. And then specifically when performing Umrah, they're not worried about losing their wudu because they accidentally came in contact with the opposite gender. Inshallah. So you don't have to make Umrah for only the deceased, from my understanding. You could actually make it for someone who's living. And I'm assuming this is the case because you can do the same for Hajj. If someone is unable to do Hajj, but they're still alive, they can ask someone else to perform Hajj on their behalf. And so I'm assuming the same applies for Umrah as well. Yeah, can sisters, if there's time, can they go for another Umrah? That's, logistically, if it's possible, there's no problem with that necessarily. The other thing I'd recommend, just because I mentioned that I wouldn't recommend doing Umrah too many times in one trip, is that just because you're not performing Umrah, just because you're not in the state of Ihram, doesn't mean you can't take advantage of worship, right? It's actually superior to even praying sunnah prayer is to do tawaf, right? Because tawaf is almost like a form of prayer. It's a form of worship. And so at any point in time, you can go make tawaf. And for sisters, it's easier because for brothers, we can't enter the mataf area, the ground floor, except in a state of ihram. But for women, you can't tell if a woman's in the state of ihram. So it is possible for the women to go at any point in time, especially when it's not crowded, and do tawaf. So you don't have to be in the state of before performing Umrah to do tawaf. So I'd recommend, as much as possible, people are doing tawaf, they're spending time in the masjid, they're doing their ibadah. They don't have to necessarily perform multiple Umrahs to do the tawaf. So you can, outside of Umrah, you can, it doesn't have to be 7 times specifically. You can do tawaf as much as time allows or as many times as you'd like. Within the Umrah, you have to do it 7 times specifically. Any other questions?
I'm sorry.
I was going to suggest if you can quickly touch bases if someone loses their wudu during tawaf, what to do.
If someone loses their wudu during tawaf, you just exit from the group, or if you're doing it by yourself, and you just go make wudu, and you'd come back and you pick up where you left off. So there's nothing else that needs to be done. You can't continue because you have to be in a state of wudu to do the tawaf. So you just leave and you'd come back and then you pick up where you left off. That should be it. Hope that answers that question. Any other questions? I think someone held.
What is the benefit of doing multiple umrahs?
So doing Umrah is recommended. It's encouraged. It purifies one of sins, and many other things we mentioned. It is a cure from poverty. But that's not necessarily in one trip. Again, it's okay if one performs Umrah multiple times in one trip, but ideally this is referring to coming back, within a few years time and performing Umrah. Yeah, that's a good point. I heard that if you want to make an Umrah for someone else, alive or deceased, it has to be for someone who couldn't make it themselves, not a healthy person, right? So it's someone who wouldn't be able to perform Umrah themselves or Hajj themselves, that you do it on their behalf, whether they're alive or deceased. Any other questions?
Now, if you can please let us know if we can do Umrah on behalf of couple, more than one person at the same time. Like if
Inshallah.
I think about myself, maybe I will do it twice, one for myself, and the second one will be on behalf of my mom and dad, and both of them died. So I cannot make it 3 times, and that's going to be too much on me. So can we do multiple, like intention for
Yeah.
one Umrah for both?
I'll have to double check on this question. I don't know off the top of my head. I did a quick search, and I'm not saying that this is definitive. It seems to be the case you have to intend one person at a time. So I don't think you can do it for more than once, but I can ask my teachers and check the vet books to see if that's not the case.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
One thing's also I noticed with the previous years, so many students and even adults, they like to go and touch the Kaaba. If there is any hasanat that we get if we touch the Kaaba for the sake of only touching it or taking picture next to the Kaaba.
Taking pictures next to the Kaaba, there's nothing commendable or rewardable about that, just because they didn't take pictures back then. And if anything, I feel like today the culture of social media and it's a form of ostentation potentially, not necessarily. So I'm not saying it's haram to take a picture of the Kaaba or take a picture next to it. But there's nothing rewardable or commendable about that. In terms of touching the Kaaba, that itself is not problematic. It's actually sunnah to be able to, for example, kiss the black stone, to be at the multazam, potentially even hold the door. So that's all fine. It's just out of love, as long as someone's not doing anything out of the ordinary, but it's just trying to approach the Kaaba, touch it. It's actually fragrant as well, and so there's a smell to it. So there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's actually encouraged. At the same time, given the dynamics, if it comes at the expense of hurting someone or being rude to someone, pushing, and so on and so forth, then I think that would actually defeat the purpose. And so if one is able to approach the Kaaba, get close to the Kaaba, touch the Kaaba, and they're not doing all of those things, then I think it's something that is commendable and rewardable. Praying, alhamdulillah, last year I was able to pray in the Fajr in the second row behind the Kaaba, right? These are all things that are beautiful and encouraged to do if possible, but not at the expense of causing harm.
Or harm to yourself, especially the girls, like going in
Absolutely.
between the men, only to
Absolutely.
take picture next to the Kaaba.
Definitely. So I would not encourage, especially to take a picture, but even to kind of try to touch it, if it's causing a lot of harm or putting yourself at harm, I wouldn't recommend it. Last year, I remember there was I think it was a couple, or one of the two elderly people, one of them passed away. They were trying to approach the Kaaba, and it was just too much. It's a very intense experience. Like there's so many people and there's so much pressure. I've never really experienced something like it before. So I would recommend, if you're not in the best of health, then you don't even attempt to do so.
So Sister Sana, you're asking if we are going in group for prayer. Yes, we will be going groups, inshallah. So we will communicate on WhatsApp. Brother Farsad, he's asking if WhatsApp will be the main communication. Yes, WhatsApp will be the main communication, inshallah. I believe we can also get SIM card from there, and it's very close to the hotel. So most of us will get the SIM card, and that's another way of communication.
WhatsApp works with just messages or voice messages, but you cannot do phone calls via WhatsApp in Saudi. They have that blocked. So maybe if you plan to do voice calls, you might need to use another means like Messenger. But in terms of communication, everything is feasible, like texting or voice messages via WhatsApp, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay. Any other question?
All right. Bismillah. I think that might be it. And inshallah, on Tuesday when we meet in person, if people have more questions, or if they send me questions in advance, I can prepare and have them ready as well. And during the trip, I'm happy to answer questions as needed, inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah. Yeah, Jazakallah khair. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending the meeting. Inshallah, we will see you all at 6:30 on Tuesday. Please make sure that you come on time, as we will be giving all the items, the tickets. Sister Reem will be sharing the itinerary. If you have any question, please send it to Brother Yusuf or send it to me or Sister Reem, inshallah. We'll be more than happy to answer any question. Okay. Ustaz Yusuf, would you like to say dua before we end?
Bismillah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Ameen ya Rab. All right, take care, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair.
Oh, and when did, oh, they got the field goal?